Please welcome to the stage Dave Ed Edwards from Vicon.
Hello, hello, thank you very much. That was an enthusiastic applause, which I'm not used to, so thank you for raising my ego to a completely unprecedented level. Thank you everyone and to Staffs University for the invitation to speak to you all today. As someone who studied here and worked here, it's been a real pleasure to come back and actually talk from a different perspective on things pertaining to the interests of everyone in this room. And my talk is entitled Progress in Motion, Delivering Value in the Age of Machine Learning. And if that seems like a somewhat cynical, vague way of capitalizing on the rage of ML and AI in recent conversations, accurate. But at the same time, for those who like a bit more specificity in their titles, this is going to be somewhat of a case study in a product that we recently brought to market during a time when there's a lot of focus on ML and AI. And what I wanted to talk about is less the specific technology and more the process we went through to understand what people actually want to achieve. How can we deliver value, where it's not just about the tech, but it's about the problems that we are solving. Now, I know what a lot of you are probably thinking. Who was this Adonis, the spectacle of intellect before us? And to you I say, please stop looking at your phones and instead look at me, because my name is David Ed Edwards, and I am the product lead for entertainment and hardware, which essentially means anything that we build in a software capacity for the entertainment market is my problem, and anything we build in hardware, full stop, is my problem. Who are we? We are Vicon Motion Systems. To give you some summary as to who and what we are. We were established in 1984 in Oxford. We have offices across the globe, Denver, LA, and we also have distributors based in Europe and APAC, and we build motion capture systems. And sometimes PowerPoint works. Like now, we are known in our systems for high levels of accuracy. That's the one thing that we've always been most kind of well-renowned for, is when you buy a Vicon motion capture system, you have a level of confidence that the accuracy and the precision of the data you are capturing is going to be of a very, very high standard. Somewhat uniquely, we also cater for a range of markets. So we don't just build mocap tools for VFX, we also build them for life sciences, for engineering, and more. And one thing that's really been important to our own development as a company is scalability and integration with other systems and tools that people want to use as part of their workflows. And of course, we are somewhat social because that's all the rage these days. If anyone wants to check us out on any of those pages, you are welcome to do so. We've got plenty of cool stuff there. Now, there are various different types of motion capture available, but what we've specialized over the years is optical motion capture. And I don't want to assume everyone is familiar with how optical mocap works, so I want to spend a bit of time just kind of grounding us in that. First and foremost, you will have a performer who we cover in retroreflective markers. It's not just because we think that's a fashion trend that's going to pick up. That's part of what we use to actually capture, because those markers are then tracked by our cameras as 2D blobs, which is a very technical term that we're doing our best to popularize. And those are then identified by the software as a centroid. That centroid is then tracked by all cameras in the system, giving you a three-dimensional position for that marker in space. And with that, we can use what's called a labeling template. And that's essentially a layout of markers, giving them context. So, you know, if this marker is near this marker, it's potentially for this part of the skeleton. And with all that coming together, it allows us to generate and drive a skeleton based on that specific performer. So it isn't just a skeleton that we scale to performers. They do what's called a range of motion. We'll do a series of actions, and what that informs the system is things like bone lengths, or the extents to which certain parts of the body can bend and move, giving you the highest, most accurate possible digital representation of that performer you could possibly hope for. Also accommodates things like props. So if you want to add a virtual camera to the mix, or you want several people, or you want to attack someone with an axe, we all have those days. We can accommodate that within the system as well. Just to give you a sense of what this looks like, this is a video from a couple of years back at SIGGRAPH 2023, and you'll see some examples of all that stuff in motion. We have an actor who is fully covered in fully covered in markers, also using a prop, but critically, we're getting really, really high fidelity data, also at a low level of latency, meaning that from a real-time perspective, what you're seeing is extremely close to what you are actually performing. Now, that's great for when it comes to capturing data, but it's what people do with it that also matters in a game context. Sometimes we have scenarios where games or films will feature characters that don't necessarily look like people. For example, this turtle monster has biological differences to a human being. They have a beak, they have a shell, They have a tail. They have these things that aren't necessarily one-to-one with the performer generating that motion. But we can use retargeting and different methods to ensure that a human's performance can still be transferred over to that character. This is useful for a variety of contexts, but certainly in real time when it comes to pre-visualization, we can take that data and we can stream it straight into a game engine. So it means that whereas motion capture was often seen as a tool just to be used for the final high-quality animation, it can be used in a pre-vis context, just to start testing ideas, seeing how they work in the intended environment. I just love looking at monsters fight robots. It's a thing. We've been featured, our products have been featured in the production of a number of games. I assume many people in this room have played games or watched films, and any you have interacted with that feature digital characters have most likely been produced by Vicon at some point. Mini Groot. Moving on. Now, a question that you might have, having seen all that, is a fairly reasonable one, which is, okay, that's cool. What has that got to do with me as, say, a game studio or a graduate or a veteran developer? There are different people in the building today representing different personas, different use cases, and different backgrounds. We have myself representing a 40-year-old technology company. We have game studios like Flix and so forth. We have developers who've been in the industry for a long time, and we have graduates who are just looking to get into the industry. And across that, we have a spectrum of personas. We have people who are maybe just getting in the industry. We have folks who've worked at game studios or maybe want to move into indie. Everyone has a very unique set of circumstances and requirements, but there's one question that unifies us all and really guides a lot of what we do. And that question is, quite frankly, what must I provide for people to pay me for the thing I do? That might not be the most elegant way of wording it, but it's how I've always seen it. Ever since I graduated and started getting into industry and working with different people, fundamentally, what I have to keep asking myself is, where is the value in what I'm doing? What can I provide that people are going to look at and say, yes, we need this as part of where we're going to go? But there's a critical context that applies now that hasn't maybe applied more recently, and that is, how do I do this when the industry appears to be changing so quickly, and the technologies used within that are changing so quickly as well? A reasonable question is, well, why are they changing? One simple word with which we're all familiar, if anyone spent so much as a millisecond on LinkedIn, is AI. Not Al. There could be a bloke called Al behind all this, but I'm not into those kind of conspiracy theories. Fundamentally, AI is something that is having an impact on every single part of the workflow and the industry. Just to be a bit more specific, when we talk about AI, we're often talking about two different things. When we talk about AI, we typically talk about systems that are designed to automate processes that perhaps would usually be done by a human being. When we talk about machine learning, we are talking about the systems that are used within that. So when we talk about machine learning, that's very much the emphasis on what we're talking about as a company, where we're interested in those processes that we can put in place to make those tools and those processes faster. Now, even though these topics have dominated the conversation recently, what's important to remember is a lot of this stuff actually goes way further back. We can see examples of where AI and machine learning have been used as far back as automated piloting systems, for bank checking systems. It's not that these technologies or concepts haven't existed before. We are just seeing their evolution, their proliferation across various industries at a much higher rate than we saw previously. Now, what was the promise that machine learning was presenting to motion capture? Markerless being the key one. Back maybe 3 or 4 years ago is when we started looking at markerless as a means of capturing motion data, and we announced our first project at SIGGRAPH 2023, which was a VR experience where we had 6 people could walk into a space, they put a headset on, and they were tracked instantly in real time. So they could interact with each other, they could interact with the environment. This was a high fidelity experience where we had 6 people all working at the same time, all using what was then largely a research project that was done underway with a commercial partner. However, every single conference we've been to since then, there's been a somewhat obvious question, which is, that's cool, but what are you doing for me? What are you doing for games and VFX? What is Vicon doing with markerless motion capture for this particular industry? To that, I would return the question, well, why do you care? Usually a bit more politely, why is that of interest to you? And quite often we would see these very consistent insights from people. The primary one being, optical motion capture takes quite a lot of time to set up. We want something that's quicker. Part of that is we want to be able to deliver animation to other parts of the workflow more quickly. Optical motion capture is expensive. You've got hardware, you've got truss, you need to have the space to put it all in. We want something that's more lightweight and easy to use. Connected to that, We want something that anyone can work with. We want an animator to be able to walk into a space, capture some data and work with it. And as much as anything else, I don't know why PowerPoint hates me on these days, we want to make better products. Fundamentally, what we want to do is make better games more quickly, and we see ML and AI and markerless motion capture as being a way of facilitating that. Now, when you look at these things in context, it's very easy to immediately assume that what you want is a replacement. This is how we're currently doing things. We think we're going to do things this way, and we want to use that instead. But when you look at things from this perspective, you actually miss a lot of value that this technology could be facilitating by focusing too much on just replacing what you currently have. A good example of this will be VR. So this is Sandbox VR. They're a company that we work with, where they have these VR environments set up all across the globe, where you go in, you put on a headset, you carry a gun, you say, I'm going to fight in a medieval world or a zombie land, whatever you want, whatever your choice is, and we facilitate that. But I remember in the dark ages of 15 years ago or thereabouts, when VR was first coming back as a concept again through the Oculus Rift and the work that was going on there. And a lot of the conversation in the press and on LinkedIn at the time was, everything's going to be VR in a year. There'll be no first-person shooter games that aren't VR. But that isn't the reality. It's taken way longer for VR to find its feet and find a niche where it delivers value that the current markets or current approaches don't facilitate. So what that meant for us was, we have these insights, but ultimately, what problems do we want to fix? What problems do customers have that we can fix? It's all well and good identifying problems, it's all well and good having solutions, but if the solutions don't meet a problem or a need that actually exists, no one is going to adopt it. So to work through this process, we kicked off one of our first ever pioneer programs, where we sent out prototype versions of our markerless system, that included hardware and software, out to these customers, and they gave us feedback. They used it, they abused it, they broke it, they said, that's great, but now we need these things, and it became an iterative process where we continue to build on that over time. That process looked something like this, where essentially it wasn't about we go from A to B to C, or traditionally D following that. It was about having a cyclical process where we would have assumptions or ideas, we would inform our expectations of what the product needed to do based on that, and then rather than go too far down the rabbit hole and develop something that wasn't necessarily the final version that was needed, we'd check that with those customers so they could say, you're on the right path, or maybe this isn't quite what we're looking for. That gave us a context of two major elements, looking at the big picture and the small picture. The big picture essentially being taking a look at what the workflow for animation and motion capture teams realistically is. This won't come as news to anyone who's worked around the industry at all. These kind of workflows are pretty common. But what was interesting from looking at it from a step back was understanding the context, which is when you start developing a project, your clarity is low. The clarity on what you are building and why is low, and it gets stronger as the project continues. Conversely, as you get further along that process, the risk of making a change gets higher. So you have this interesting relationship where you're getting better ideas about what you want to do. However, making changes or accommodating changes to those ideas brings an awful lot of risk that you can't necessarily accommodate that late into the process. Also understanding the minutiae, the small details. And we started to get a whole series of points back from customers talking about things that previously they'd never mentioned. Some of these are really interesting from an AI perspective, because so much of what we heard was you capture data, you process it in the cloud, you can work with it. So many studios would not use the cloud. Everything has to be local, it has to be controlled for data protection reasons, for security reasons. So that was a complete area that we were already accommodating that we hadn't even necessarily discussed because it wasn't within the context of what was being done at the time. And what this revealed to us was some insights into where people wanted to go in future. We'd like to mix different technologies together, but also understanding what do you need now? What problems are you facing today that we can aim to address? And fundamentally what came out of this was it wasn't about changing how people are already doing motion capture. It was giving them motion capture earlier in the process. So rather than waiting until the final shoot or trying to get into a busy optical stage, they wanted to use mocap just to start getting ideas together. I'm an animator, I have an idea for a gameplay animation, I just want to go and shoot it now and work with it and not have this monthly cycle to get to it. Likewise, from a previs perspective, Everything that makes motion capture great, optical motion capture great from a data quality perspective, isn't necessary when you just want to get an idea together. So we started to see this interesting place where markerless, the quality that markerless could deliver and the accessibility was commensurate with the value that part of the process would deliver to the studio at the time. It's also extremely important to see all this in context, which is that at the moment, we see a lot that's going on in the industry. We see an increase in people wanting to adopt risk-averse approaches. They want to be confident that if we're paying for this thing, it's going to serve us long-term and it's going to bring us value. And that's something that speaks for everyone involved with the industry. So it wasn't just about delivering a technology or a process. It was about delivering a product that made sense and where these studios are at the time that the industry currently sees itself in. Now, I'm going to let this video play for just a couple of minutes because this captures one of the earliest versions of the product that we released and the challenges that it helped us.
The great thing about Vicon's new markerless system is the ability for us to put talent straight into the performance capture stage and very early start testing creative ideas. I'm Simon Windsor, co-founder and co-CEO at Dimension Studio. Dimension is a production studio. We specialize in real-time content creation, real-time visual effects, and virtual production services for the film and TV industry, for live events and experiential and immersive. Dimension has a long-standing partnership and as a collaborator with Vicon. Their technologies are important to the work we do in virtual production, in film and TV, specifically with previs, animation, rapid prototyping, early creative development. And we were excited to be invited to be a beta partner for their new markerless mocap system.
The purpose of this project is to demonstrate what Vicon's markerless motion capture system can do to enable a friction-free environment to capture as much motion and story points as possible to allow the director or creative to use all that data to craft the perfect film. In the past, when we've done motion capture shoots, usually the first hour or two is spent getting the actors and the talent into the suits, getting them calibrated. This way, we don't have that overhead. We just come in, system boots up, T-pose, and we're done.
Thank you, that's perfect.
At Dimension, we're really about trying to help the filmmaking process. And a big part of that is understanding how the shots might start to look. So being able to use something like the markerless system allows us to very quickly iterate. It tracks me straight away and I can start acting and workshopping on movements. But it also allows Martin to step in and say, can I just have a go at this and see what it looks like? The nice thing about the Vicon system is it integrates really well with Unreal. You can remotely trigger from Unreal and it will record in the Vicon system. We can retarget directly in Vicon so that we're applying the animation directly onto the final skeleton, onto the metahuman, so we see the results immediately. And then the filmmaking process all lives within Unreal, so everything's recorded with sound, with sync, so time code into the game engine.
So that should capture just some of the core elements that we wanted to exploit for the benefit of users. But what you'll have seen watching that, if you've looked at other motion capture studios, is it's a completely different environment. No longer is it a huge, dedicated space. Essentially, they set this up in a back room. And that's what people were looking for, is the flexibility to just go in and shoot data in a place that doesn't have all the overheads and the expense and the complexity that they're used to with an optical stage. Now, I'm sure you are all wondering, I'm pretty good at just predicting people's questions. Cool, that's really exciting, but again, what's that got to do with me? The purpose of this is to demonstrate that in times like the ones we are currently in the industry, there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of talk, there's a lot of hype, and it can be extremely difficult to put that to one side and actually focus on what problem do we want to solve. Because if we don't solve those problems, ultimately people will not adopt. They might get excited, they might see the potential, but until you are solving problems they have, then it's not going to be a solution they are too keen to adopt. And that's true whether you are from a 40-year-old video game technology company, whether you are from a game studio, a veteran developer, or a graduate. That is still a concern that's going to be relevant to all of us. And the reason I go through this process is I think it demonstrates some key principles that anyone can employ in understanding how do I apply this to my own experience. With everything changing as quickly as it is, People want a reduction in risk. They want confidence that the thing that they are investing in, whether it's a piece of software or hardware or a person joining their team, that they are going to bring value. And when it comes to presenting yourself in the workspace, whether it's through a portfolio, whether it's people that you are going to work with, I encourage everyone to always focus as much as you can on that value. Now that might trigger the question, okay, genius, what is value? We can start by saying what value is absolutely not. Value, I promise you, is none of these things. Quite often these things can masquerade as value. Quite often value is intertwined within them. But fundamentally, the excitement, the complexity that something potentially demonstrates, whether something is fun or novel, these are all cool things and they're worth investigating, but they don't necessarily equate to value. So what is value? Value is several things. Fundamentally, though, what it comes down to is making people's lives better. Whether that's reducing current troubles that they run into, whether it's maximizing the joy they get out of the thing they're already doing, fundamentally, it's the net benefit of something being used that otherwise would not be. Essentially, when you come to look and say, am I delivering value? Am I likely to deliver value? Ask yourself, is what I'm delivering achieving this? Is the thing I'm making or delivering making this person or this team's life better? Now, that's a very easy thing to say, but what I wanted to share is just some key points that I always have started adopting, just to check, is value something I am focusing on? The first point being, focus on a pain. Understand the person you want to work with or who you want to adopt your skills or your product. Understand what are your problems, and don't necessarily even bias it with a pre-existing expectation of what they're doing. Just ask them, what does your day look like? Make it a conversation, speak to people to actually understand what their life looks like in a professional context. From that, it gives you a framework to then look at your own skills and your own capabilities and things you deliver, to start getting a sense of, these are the pains, what do I have that potentially addresses that? And then challenge your own pre-existing expectations about what that might be. We all go in with an idea of this is how the industry works, or this is what people are looking for. It's always important to challenge your own biases or your own expectations and let the data you are getting back actually inform your understanding of the world you are planning to head into. And don't just let it exist as hypothesis. Put it out there, whether it's a prototype piece of work, whether it's an illustration or something that you want to test, am I solving a pain with? And get feedback. Post it online. Getting feedback is brutal. Let me tell you, as a product manager, a product lead who's responsible for the products we produce, there is nothing more painful than seeing people say, this is a problem I have with this. But there's nothing more valuable. Nothing will make you better at delivering value than understanding where you are not delivering value, where your shortcomings are. And once you've done that, repeat the cycle. It's very easy to sometimes look at life as being a straight line where I will do this thing, I will get a job, I'll do this thing, then I move on to the next place. It's never that simple. So consistently applying these methods and understanding that it is an organic process that will change over time is a really useful thing to employ. Now, where might we apply this in the games industry? I wanted to pick out just a couple of examples to give you a sense of what we mean when we talk about value. When we talk about value in a games development context, essentially, we want games to be made more efficiently. We want the experience of making them to be more productive, more enjoyable, so that a better end product comes out of it. That can come down to reducing the amount of time it takes to create work. Some of it can come down to actually understanding, is this the experience the player wants, or are we just assuming that that is what they want? That stems out to the players themselves. What assumptions do we have about how they perceive value from our product? Are the controls intuitive enough? Is the content that we are producing resonating with the team we are interacting with the player we are interacting with? That's something you can ask from both a personal perspective, someone focusing on a particular trade, but the same for a studio. And also the teams you are working with. How is the work I am doing making life better for the people I am working with? You can be the best artist in the world, you can be the best animator, but if the way you work and the work you produce somehow creates blocks for other parts of the team, you're potentially producing a net negative for the value that you are otherwise presenting to that team. It's not just about the work you create. It's about how that work interfaces with the people you are interacting with. And by no means do I mean to suggest that this represents everything, the entire pantheon of where value exists. But these are very simple things that quite often get overlooked. When there is so much pressure on, I need to know these technologies, these tool sets, this is what people are interested in, quite often we let that guide our expectation of where value is. And what I was aiming to demonstrate through our case study is if we'd taken that approach, we'd have potentially missed out on a complete area within the industry that is of extreme value to the users. Now, I don't want to talk too much about machine learning because it's everywhere, and I'm sure we're all pretty tired about it, but something I would generally suggest is it's important to remember that for all the hype, a lot of ML and AI tools are very much in their infancy. They're finding their feet from a technological perspective, but also from a use case perspective. They're still figuring out which problems they solve, how they solve them. And it's worth taking that into consideration when you are trying things yourself. And what I would encourage everyone to do, don't be too committed to any one workflow or any one tool set. Understand that these tools are evolving alongside user needs. So experiment. When it comes to understanding the value you want to provide, don't limit yourself in the tools you exploit to get that information. Going in with an open mind and not being too guided again by the noise you see around you can more often than not lead you to something that's actually going to deliver value for you and by extension, the people you wish to work with. Fundamentally, when I say progress in motion, even though it's partially a pun, because apparently that's what I'm addicted to, what I'm trying to capture is the principle that none of this is linear, nor is it stagnant. These are processes that you want to employ on a cyclical basis. You understand a pain, you deliver something to address that pain, and then you test, you ask, has this helped? If not, you go back, you check your premises, you check your biases, and you go through the process again. If so, wicked. We move on to the next problem. Adopting that into your workflow, whether you are working at a tech company, whether you're a game studio, or a developer, or just getting into the industry, the more you can employ that as part of your method, the more confidence you can have that progress will follow and success as a result of that. I thank you very much for your time and your patience. I will be around the confectionery stand because I love my sweets. So if anyone has any questions, I am more than happy to answer them. Thank you again. Thank you to staffs. Enjoy the rest of UKIE. Thank you.